Okay, welcome to this session of Soil and Plant Nutrition Management. My name is Johannes Schuler. I'm from the Leibniz Center of Agricultural Landscape Research. Actually, it's not my area of expertise, so I will not be able to ask very mean questions, very general questions, if there are lacking questions. But I'm really interested in the topic, so let's start right away to save time. All presenters, be aware, 10 minutes at the most. You should present to have some time for questions and answers afterwards. So let's start with Milion Sileshi Haile with his presentation on impact of integrated soil fertility management practices on smallholder farmers' welfare in Ethiopia. So a topic which is not just natural science, I assume. So we will see about how it affects people's well-being. Okay, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, my name is Milion Sileshi. Welcome to my presentation entitled Impact of Integrated Soil Fertility Management Practice on Smallholder Farmer Welfare in Ethiopia. This is a joint research project with Bekkele, Shibere, and Stefan. So, yeah, this is the outline of the presentation, introduction, method, result, and conclusion. So the motivation of the study is direct forward, and several or food and nutritional insecurity is the main challenge on the globe, and millions of the pupils are suffer from food and nutritional insecurity. And this food and nutritional insecurity is affect less development country disproportionately, around one, especially according to FAO report in 2020, 1 in every 5 Africans was malnourished. And as we know, agriculture have a significant contribution of the country economic growth and have potential to reduce food and nutritional insecurity. The level of food and nutritional insecurity in less developed countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, is very high, especially in rural area where subsistence agriculture is the main livelihood. So there is no any doubt. Increasing agricultural productivity is one of the pillars to reduce food and nutritional insecurity. So one way of increasing agricultural production and productivity is sustainable agricultural intensification. So sustainable agricultural intensification is increasing agricultural production and productivity within a given land without affecting the environment. So one way of sustainable agricultural intensification is integrated soil fertility management. That means using the combination of different soil fertility practice, like improved seed, different agronomical practice, inorganic and organic fertilizers, and so on. But the combination is based on the local agroecological condition, as well as the availability of material. So different study indicated that integrated soil fertility management enhance the soil fertility and moisture content, also reduce land degradation, improve soil health. On the other hand, when we see the use of inorganic fertilizer in Ethiopia, the last 10 years, the level of adoption of improved fertilizer is increased, and the amount of land covered by inorganic fertilizer almost doubled in the last 10 years. We know organic fertilizer increase agricultural production and productivity. However, continuous usage of this is negative impact on the environment as well as particularly in the land. That means reduce grain quality and nutritional content of the grain, and also it affects the acidity level of the soil and also affect the soil structure. So as a result, combining using of inorganic fertilizer with other conservation practice could be considerable improving agricultural production and productivity, as well as reducing food insecurity. So this study consider inorganic fertilizer and soil water conservation practice and analyze the adoption and synergy of impact on household welfare in Eastern Ethiopia. So there are several studies assess the impact as well as the synergy of different integrated soil fertility management. However, some of the studies have limitation. The first limitation is most of the studies are focused a single agricultural practice, like impact of improved seed, only improved seed, impact of soil water conservation, impact of fertilizer. And the second one is the estimation problem. And most of the studies use at household level and also use propensity score matching and simple regression, which is difficult to capture the absorbent and unabsorbed characteristic which affect the outcome variable as well as adoption. And the third limitation is a mixed finding. So there is a need for more empirical evidence from various settings. So this study used multinomial endogenous switching regression and assess the individual or combined effect of fertilizer and soil water conservation on household welfare, while it captured both absorbed and unabsorbed factor. So the study conducted on Eastern Hararge and used multi-stage sampling procedure, and the data were collected from 408 households and 781 plots in the 3 districts using semi-structured questionnaire and personal observation, focus group discussion, and key informant interview. So to assess the adoption and the impact of integrated soil water conservation practice, the study used endogenous switching regression. Like other endogenous switching regression, multinomial endogenous switching regression have 2 stages. The first one is we use multinomial logic. The second one is because of the outcome variables are continuous, we use ordinary least score method. Then we estimate the expected value of the outcome variable in the 2 scenarios. The 2 scenarios, the real and the counterfactual. So the average treatment effect is the difference between the real and the counterfactual of the outcome variable. So, okay. So the result indicated that the first table shows the distribution of different soil fertility management practice. So around 23% of the households do not adopt any soil water conservation, and the remaining 25, 20, and 30% adopt only fertilizer and soil water conservation and combination of soil water conservation and fertilizer. So this is a descriptive statistics. So the descriptive statistics indicated that there is a significant difference between adopter and non-adopter among the 2 outcome among the different adoption category. And the determinant decision of adoption of soil water conservation integrated soil management practice indicated that different socioeconomic institution and demographic characteristics influence adoption of only fertilizer, only soil water conservation, and combination of fertilizer and soil water conservation. And the impact result or the average treatment results indicated that adoption only fertilizer and adoption of only soil water conservation and combination are significantly influence significantly enhance the household welfare, or that means net crop value and per capita food consumption expenditure. So particularly the net crop value and per capita food consumption expenditure gain is higher when the farmers adopt both fertilizer and soil water conservation simultaneously. So when we come to, for example, this result is very higher than if the farmers adopt separately, like adopting soil water conservation only and adopting fertilizer only. So the key takeaway from this study is adopting improved agriculture and soil water conservation method either independently and together result in increasing the net crop value as well as per capita food consumption expenditure. Interestingly, the household welfare gain are larger when inorganic fertilizer and soil water conservation practice are adopted simultaneously than adopted separately. And hence, the country, like in Ethiopia, 40% of the households are food insecure, and most of them are in the rural area. Integrated soil fertility management should give more attention and considering to reduce food and nutritional insecurity, as well as reduce land degradation. So most important, focusing on those factors found to associated with adoption of combination of both practice may help to reap high welfare gain from adopting of soil fertility management practice. Thank you very much.
It was a nice presentation. You kept the time. Thank you. Any questions? Any others? Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you very much for your nice presentations. I have one question on fertilizers. That is, you consider only inorganic fertilizers. But Hararge people utilize also organic fertilizers because they practice the mixed farming system. So why you ignore the organic fertilizers among the materials you use as integrated soil fertility management? With this, there is also the different type of soil and water conservation are practiced in that area. For example, strip cropping and intercropping. Intercropping in a sense, cropping the cereal crop with chat. Chat is intercropped with cereal crop. So it is a one type of soil and water conservation they practice in that area. So do you consider this? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your question. Yeah, in Eastern Hararghe zone, they use different soil water conservation practice. Okay, different soil water conservation practice, but this is a follow-up research, and the previous research is only focused on physical soil conservation practice like soil band, stone band, and bench terracing. So here in this paper, we wanted to see the synergy of integrated inorganic fertilizer with physical soil water conservation practice. So, in these types of study, we need large data. That means if you combine additional one practice, we need a lot of data. As you see, in each practice, we absorb 100 something household, 120 or 13 plots. So if you add additional soil water conservation practice, we need large data, but those practices are the most common practice in Eastern Hararghe because the landscape, it's very hilly, and also the availability of stone and other materials is easy in Eastern Hararghe. So the farmers are more likely to adopt physical soil water conservation than others practice.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
unfortunately, time is over already. We have to hurry. The next presentation will be online, I assume, by Abdullah Tasheem Mohammed Shah. And he will present us about from burning to conserving residues, the role of machinery service providers in disseminating conservation tillage. Abdullah, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Is it
Should I
ready?
share my screen or is it?
Yeah, you can, if you want, you can present from your screen.
Yeah,
So
I'll do
you
that.
navigate through your slides. Can you try sharing your screen?
Yeah, I'm fine. Is it visible?
Okay. Yep. Now presentation mode. Let's hope it works.
Is it okay? Is it visible, sir?
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, you can start. The floor is yours. The
Okay.
video is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm here to present on the paper From Burning to Conserving Residues, the role of machinery service providers in disseminating alternative tillage technologies. Myself, the presenter and author, Abdullah Tasheem Mohammed Shah, co-authored by a few of us and supported by the data from CIMMET, India. And first of all, I would run through the outline of the presentation, which would be divided into background of the paper, study area, design and data collection, results and discussion, conclusion, along with policy implications. Firstly, to the background of the paper, we know that an increasing population is to feed an increasing population without compromising on the nature or environment is a very challenging scenario. So historically, if we see, Green Revolution era has brought in intensive agriculture and developments in technological achievements that had supported a boom in the agriculture industry. Which led to the introduction of a irrigated rice wheat cropping system in the South Asia, particularly the Indo-Gangetic plains in India, and that brought in a challenge with it, along with it. That is crop residue burning. That was due to mechanical harvest and climate shifts. Crop residue burning basically occurs because the farmer doesn't get enough time between his in his rice wheat cropping system, between the harvest of the rice crop and the sowing of the wheat crop. He has a very limited time frame, and this is because of the mechanized harvest use of combined harvesters, which leaves a lot of residues and scattered in, itself in the plot, which will make it very laborious for the farmer to separate it. And climate shifts like delayed monsoons, which will ultimately lead to delayed sowing of the rice crop. So this crop residue burning issue is a huge issue, because see, an estimate of 19 million metric tons of rice stubbles are burned in the Northwest India itself as of the data from 2017. And the consequences that we face are pollution, basically, soil degradation, erosion risk, and it even adversely affect the soil microbes, and it will ultimately reduce the crop productivity. A possible solution to this, as we all know, is an alternative tillage technology, opting for a conservation tillage technique. And what is alternative tillage technology? It is a set of agri practices that minimizes soil disturbance by the preparation of fields, minimizes soil disturbance during the field preparation for planting of the crops. So alternative tillage technologies has a key role in reducing this residue burning. And categorizing it, tillage can be alternate and conventional. And I'm dealing with alternate. So again, bifurcating it into shallow tillage and no tillage. Shallow tillage is just disturbing the upper layer of the soil and incorporating the residues along with it, so that the field looks clean. And this is what it is preferred by the farmers in India. And there are two generations, rotavator being the first and superseeder being the second generation shallow tillage machinery, whereas zero tillage drill, happy seeder and smart seeder are no tillage alternate tillage drills of first, second and third generation respectively. And even if recognizing the importance of the alternate tillage technologies, the government of India has incentivized, they have provided subsidies to the ATT machineries, but still the adoption remains very limited. It is around 16% in Punjab to absolutely 0% in Bihar. So this limitation is because the machinery itself is very costly. See, the happy seed will cost around 1.5 to 2 lakhs, and super seeder is even more costly, around 3 lakhs it costs Indian rupees. So it is not affordable for small scale farmers, because most of the farmers are marginal farmers and they can't afford it. So We postulate that providing an adequate access to tillage machinery through service provision can speed up the diffusion process and reduce the residue burning in this particular region. And hence our study area is Punjab, is the northwestern part of India. It's also called as the granary of India, with its agriculture contributing to 31% of the GVA, that is the gross value added to the state. And the major crops grown are rice, wheat, cotton, etc. And the rice wheat rotation is being followed. And you can see that there's a significant procurement. The procurement from this particular state is 23% and 51 of rice and 51% of wheat for all procurements made by the FCI, the Food Corporation of India, as of records of the Government of India 2023. And Punjab, to select Punjab, you see Punjab is a very fertile. It has fertile land suitable for cultivation, good irrigation systems, good marketing facilities, etc. And very vast area under modern farming techniques in India. So this is the sample map where you can see our state is Punjab with 8 districts has been selected, and sample villages has been marked. Coming to the design and data collection, the data was collected via the interviews with the help of CIMIT and CIMIT India, and the data sets was one of the village level key informal survey and the other of a service provider interview. We collected data from almost 122 villages of 8 districts in Punjab. It was done in 2 stages, and the analysis here was done using linear regression model to assess variables impact on ATT adoption, and OLS regression, that is the ordinary least square regression, for estimating model coefficients has been done. Coming to the results and discussion, and apart from the various characteristics of villages and service providers that we have received as results, the major thing that we will look into will be the ATT technologies itself, because specifically superseeder, because it shows a 2-fold higher availability of service provider per 100 rice wheat farmers compared to the 1, which means that there are 2 service providers per 100 farmer for in case of a superseeder machinery, whereas it is 1 to happy seeder and 0 tillage drill. And just mere 7% of the total sample area has no service provision at all. And most of the service providers, that's around 67% of the service providers have more than 1 machinery with them. They have multiple machine rental services. And regarding the rental costs, the superseeders top the list, followed by happy seeder and 0 tillage drill. And there was a evident gender disparity in labor, because the wage rate difference was 153 per day Indian rupee more for male compared to that of the female. And labor shortage was evident. This all will affect the ATT, the adoption of ATT. And predominant clay soil was found there. So most of the soil was clay in content, and hence it was easy for the smooth operation of the ATT technologies. And this would potentially impact the ATT adoption as well. Coming to the farmer, comparing knowing the share of farmers in area covered by service providers, blue is the 2021 data, and in orange is the 2022 data. We can see year-on-year growth of a significant year-on-year growth actually of 40% in adoption and area coverage. And this actually shows the relevance and presence of service providers were increasing during this period from this result. Coming to the percentage of the farmers and area under the alternate tillage technology, we can find that the ATTs cover almost 44% of the total rice wheat area, but the share to the farmers is just 24%. This is indicating that among the large farmers, adoption is more, because more of the area is covered, but less of the percentage of farmers is included in the ATT adoption rates. And this is due to the, possibly could be due to prohibitive costs. And coming to the influence of these service providers on ATT adoption as what our paper was mainly working on. And even in villages without service providers, I already mentioned about the 7% of the total surveyed area which doesn't have any provision for service. So in this area, the ATTs are still adopted, because they are either buying the machine or they're borrowing from the nearby villages. So, however, the SPs are present when the situation is different. When the SPs are present, ATT adoption is much more prevalent. Okay, especially in case of the superseders, the shallow tillage technology, the case is very evident. And as of our assumption, we were right that the service providers positively influence the ATT adoption, highlighting the need for the awareness. And we need to support the machine owners, the service providers, to come into entrepreneurial status and bringing machinery to service. So multiple machinery by a single service provider can cause a scarcity or competition, and this could also lead to an impact. This can also cause an impact in ATT adoption. When suppose a service provider has a superseder along with the ZT technology, we found that there is an increase in the adoption of the superseder, which means, as I already mentioned, superseder is a shallow tillage. The farmers are substituting zero tillage and like they are taking shallow tillage. So probably because of the higher utility of the ST, despite of its higher rental charges or even the price itself. Now, the popularity of superseders among the farmers in India is because basically it could replace rotavators. Being a second generation shallow tillage machinery, it could replace rotavators because it could combine the rotavators and zero till functionalities together, and it will totally eliminate the need for two separate machines and maintain clean fields sowing without residue burning. And also, rotavators in India are not subsidized, whereas superseders are, which will motivate the farmers to take in superseders instead of rotavators. And from farm reports and farm experiences, superseders have reported fewer weed, rodent, and termite issues compared to happy seeders. So farmers always prioritize immediate utility, and they would definitely choose immediate utility over, and whatever environmental benefits and on a broad term we propose, they will definitely choose immediate utility. To conclude with the policy implication, this residue burning is a major challenges. With ATTs backed by targeted government subsidies could be potential solutions. So despite subsidies, ATT acquisition cost is still high. So maybe service providers, as we propose, could bridge the affordability gap and increase the adoption rate. And our study, as expected, reveals a positive link between service provision and ATT adoption, except for the paradoxical adoption of superseders, which I've already explained, came to our notice. So we need to transit farmers from this shallow tillage to zero tillage, because zero tillage is what we need. For that, we should adopt innovative mechanisms like carbon credits so that the farmers are attracted. And to conclude, addressing the residue burning challenges requiring a comprehensive approach that considers the role of the service providers, farmers' preferences, and the adoption of sustainable technologies is what we require for the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 11 minutes. That's okay. Yeah. Okay. Any questions in the hall? Yes, please.
Thank you for the presentation. This is Clara Jakbeko from University of Bonn. Could you please elaborate more about the weed management practices and pest management practices? Was it hard for farmers? Any challenges encountered? Thanks.
Okay, regarding the weeds, managing weeds or whatever, be it weed management or pest management, farmers found it very difficult when we're using technologies, especially the zero tillage technologies. We have experiences from the field that the farmers are saying that it's not suitable, and they are not adopting the zero tillage technologies just because the weed infestation is high or pest infestation is high. But they say that from our experiences as well with the farmers, we could understand that shallow tillage technologies, be it first generation or second generation, be it rotavators, because there is some amount of turning around the soil, right? So there is incorporation of this already established, already present stubbles. So with shallow tillage, this pests and weeds are under control, says the farmers.
Okay, thank you. Just one short question from my side. The superseders, is that a special model of those machines, or was it a company that provides services?
Superseders are actually a model of the machine itself. It's actually a second generation shallow tillage machinery itself, because it can also function like a rotavator, provided we remove the seedal part of the machinery. And the point the superseders are being more adopted maybe because the farmers would prefer more cleaner fields, because superseder, the functioning of it is that it just cuts out the stubbles and just incorporates in the uppermost layer of the soil. So they're being preferred, and it's actually a machinery, not a company or a business model. Thank you
very much. We have to move to the next presentation of Filippo Cartucci. And how will we do done? Will you press the button or you will present? Yeah. Just a minute. I can explain already. It will be on deep soil carbon loss offsets, rapid above ground growth after the reforestation of the Atlantic forest. Yeah, you can. Okay, you mute, and now we go to the next presentation. Thank you very much. Felipe, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Felipe Quartus. I'm going to talk about my work entitled Deep Soil Carbon Loss Offsets Rapid Above Ground Growth after Reforestation of the Atlantic Forest in Brazil. Among the natural solutions for climate change, land restoration has one of the highest impacts. For example, this work here evaluating different management options for forests, agriculture, grasslands, and wetlands. They pointed out that reforestation was ranked first, but there might be a bias on those estimates because they don't include deep soil in the analysis. And since land restoration is usually made with trees, performed with trees that grow deep, the roots deep down to the soil, this can change somehow the carbon stock with time. Which one? Okay. This is a map of Brazil showing the different biomes. I call your attention now to the Atlantic forest, which is the dark green, and where the historical deforestation took place, leading to 20% of the natural cover. And this map is showing the compliance levels to the forest code. In summary, the forest code says that each property has to leave a certain percentage of the land with natural vegetation, from 20 to 80%. If it doesn't have this certain percentage, it has to restore back to its natural state, which in the Atlantic forest is a forest. We can see here that the lower compliance levels are along the Atlantic forest. Of course, there's a bit in the Amazon, but the lower compliance levels are along the Atlantic forest, which leads to higher demand for land restoration in the Atlantic forest. But the question is that there are different types of land restorations: active restoration, passive restoration, seeding. Do they all provide the same climate change mitigation? So the further objective of my study was to assess the carbon sequestration potential of different restoration techniques in the Atlantic forest, and we included deep soil in the analysis. So the study design, we evaluated 3 different types of land restoration: agroforest systems, which is a mix of agriculture and trees. Here, especially succession agroforest systems, we evaluated reforestation with mixed native species and also natural regeneration. Reforestation is by far the most used method in the Atlantic forest, and all of those were around 18 years old when we evaluated. We also evaluated a negative reference, the agriculture, and also a secondary forest as a positive reference. For the agroforest systems, we evaluated in 2 different stages. So in an intermediate stage, around 5 years old, and also advanced. So we have 3 different methods, but for agroforest systems, 2 different stages. In total, we have 6 land uses that we evaluated. So this is the location of the study. This black dot we can see inside the Atlantic forest. It's inside a rural settlement, close, outside and inside the national forest, which encourages forest restoration as well. We use the paired sites methodology, same previous land use history, similar soil texture between the land uses, and triplicates. For each land use, we evaluated 3 times: 3 reforestation, 3 natural regeneration. And in each, so in total, 18 areas. For each area, 3 samples in total, we had 54 samples. We sampled different pools, soil and roots down to 3 meters deep. We sampled also necromass and above ground biomass. And then we calculated the carbon stocks in the different pools. This is an overview of the data source for soil, necromass, and fine roots. We went to the lab and measured carbon content in a CN analyzer. For the others, above ground biomass and coarse roots, we use data from the literature. So this is my first results. This is the carbon stock in the different land uses. There are lots of information here. I'm going to call your attention for a couple of main results. The first one is that soil organic carbon was by far the largest stock. If we only select the deep soil or below 40 centimeters, it was larger than the above ground biomass in any land use, except for the reforestation. Another thing is that if we see here that the reforestation and natural regeneration didn't differ statistically from the secondary forest. So which means that after 18 years old, more or less, they recovered the natural carbon stock in the above ground biomass. Another thing is that agroforest system in advance, if we are going to select the best method only by judging the above ground biomass or above ground carbon, we are going to say that reforestation was the best one, followed by natural regeneration, and then agroforest systems. So this, if we only analyze taking into consideration the above ground biomass. Here is this graph is showing the transition from agriculture to the restored land. This is not carbon stock anymore, but carbon sequestration after land use change. There are a couple of information here as well. The first one is that the reforestation was the only one that promoted a loss of deep soil carbon. We can see that around 25 tons of carbon per hectare was lost after 18 years, more or less. Also, we can see that and it's important to say that this was the method or the approach of land restoration that promoted the highest above ground carbon. If we compare the three restoration methods in advanced stages, which are agroforest system, reforestation, and natural regeneration, they didn't differ statistically. So if we analyze now, including topsoil and deep soil carbon, we change our judgment of the best method. In this case, they're all similar. They didn't differ statistically. If we look to the graph on the right, we can see that for agroforest system, in advanced stage, approximately 25% of the carbon sequestered comes from deep soil. So not including deep soil can underestimate in this case. For the natural regeneration, it's about 20% of this sequestration came from deep soil. So to conclude, I would say that reforestation promotes the highest above ground growth, but also promote a deep soil carbon loss. For the agroforest system and for the natural regeneration methods, higher climate mitigation potential if we include deep soil. So we have around 20 to 25% higher potential if deep soil is included. And there is a shift. There's no difference among the three restoration methods if we include the deep soil. They have similar carbon sequestration potential. If we don't include, we would say that reforestation is the best. And probably this is because it's the most used method, because it has the highest above ground potential. As a general conclusion, I would say that natural regeneration has the potential to be scaled up to the Atlantic forest because it's easier and cheaper to implement and has the same carbon sequestration potential. And agroforest system also we have a synergy of land restoration with food production, which is especially important for small land farmers. Thank you. Open for questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Felipe. Very interesting presentation. Thanks for keeping on time. We even gained some time. So we have lots of time for discussion now. Right away, first.
Thank you for the great presentation. I was wondering the results of these different practices. How well do you think you could use them in different kinds of forests, like in Brazil itself, in the rainforest, the carbon stocks in the soil are usually less, I believe, than in the more temperate forests. So how do you think this can be used in other climate zones, your results?
I would first say that I would restrict to tropical landscapes, even though natural regeneration, I think it's more used in temperate zones, I would say. But I wouldn't say that those results are valid also for temperate ecosystems, since yeah, as you mentioned, like the carbon stocks are different, and for reforestation there is some soil preparation that might also lose a little bit of this carbon, and also depth of the soil. So the biomes are different, so I would wonder that the results would be a little bit different.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. My question is on the three species. So have your study also considered the different three species, because those three species have different root type? So the carbon sequestration below ground also depend on the three species and the soil type of those agroecology. So what do you say something about on the agroecology of those soils and the three species root system? Because this carbon sequestration also depend on the three root system. Thanks so much.
Yeah. This is a good question. We didn't include in the analysis, but I would say that this is a result of different species composition. Perhaps in the system, there is a species selection when you're doing reforestation, that you tend to include species with higher growth. And this is perhaps the result of lower deep soil carbon through a mining effect. I'm not going to go into detail, but so we studied three different areas of agroforest systems, 3 different natural regeneration, and 3 reforestation. They were similar among each other, but if we compare the different systems, there were different species. And I would say in summary that one of the reasons that this is the result, I found this result, is because of different in species composition. I kind of discuss a little bit this, but we don't have detailed data about species composition to confirm that, but I would suspect that this is because of species composition.
At the farmers.
I see.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for these interesting results. George Gedish from Hohenheim. I was wondering, what are the mechanisms that we are losing so much carbon in the deep soil layers? Because one often assumes that this carbon is relatively stabilized and therefore not really subject to high turnover.
Probably because of a priming effect. In order to provide this higher growth of the above ground biomass of the reforestation, the trees exudate. There are some exudates that decompose the organic matter. So the soil probably has lower nutrient content, And in order to provide the nutrients, they degrade the organic matter in deep soil, they exudate, and this turns into a, so after the decomposition of the organic matter, they can absorb the nutrients. So it's kind of a mining effect because of the high growth of the trees. This is what we hypothesized in our work.
Okay. Any other questions? Just one kind of lay question. Where should the carbon be? Is there any way to say, is it good to have it in above ground? Because I think for agriculture, it's nice to have it in the topsoil. But since you're dealing with forests, I think it's more about sequestration. So put it somewhere.
Safer in the deep soil.
Okay.
It's safer because, for example, if a forest burns, it's going to burn the above ground carbon and a bit of the topsoil carbon. But the deep soil carbon is safer there if it's burned, for example.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Good. So we come to the next presentation. Let me double check. Should we go straight to the video or do we have?
It's Felix, right?
Yeah. Do we have Abijun present? No. So I think there we have a no-show, or is he online?
No, it doesn't take it. If this person is not on this.
Okay. I think he would make himself available if he's around, either by chat or anywhere. So we move right away then to Felix Materi. He sent us a video because he's still in, I think, in Kenya. And you can get it ready. So he wrote me he's available for questions later on. So let's see how we can.
On behalf of the listed
Okay. Just stop it for a second.
Presenting part of my PhD work, and I'll be presenting on the influence of composting materials available in the tropics and composting duration.
Okay, this may be.
On the influence and quality of manure during composting. Composting is necessary, and by composting, I will
So now we can discuss a little bit what we've seen already. Can anybody connect the dots? Does anybody want to make a little conclusion what we heard so far about these presentations? Or we can even go back to ask more questions. The floor is open for discussion. Yeah. 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 Please go ahead.
Then from there, why a deep soil carbon loss happened? Yes, and it was still knocking in my head why it happened, why deep soil, because in the deep soil we assume most of the carbon is already it becomes humic, already stabilized. The theory behind is when it goes deep, it has already completed the decomposition process and then became stable. So then how that deep soil and also in the deep, the microbial activity is very slow because of oxygen is not there, moisture deficiencies and many issues. So how the hypothesis is okay, but the priming effect is when microorganisms are very deficient with nutrients, and then when you apply very small amount like a glucose, it will reactivate their activity. But in this case, how it happens, I think you better explain.
So 1 decade ago, more or less, an interesting paper was published that changed a bit this idea of stable carbon in deep soil, that the carbon is a molecule that is stable. The stability depends on other factors, not only about the stability of the molecule. He just gave a little bit of fresh carbon, and the carbon in deep soil was lost. So this is somehow what we didn't measure this effect, but we suppose that, so the first, more 50% of the net productivity is allocated below ground, right? So it's producing lots of fresh new roots, and we found roots down to 3 meters deep. And because of the new roots and also root exudates, you were introducing fresh new carbon into the soil. And this carbon, this fresh new carbon, might have supported microorganisms that in turn primed the organic matter that supposedly was there, stable, but was not that stable as we think.
Okay, you're happy with the answer? Okay, good. So here now we are kind of rearranging again. Maybe there's a chance that Felix Materi can indeed present online, so we don't have to use the video. Let's see, I see he is on Zoom. Felix, can you hear me? Maybe turn on your mic. We'll try to have you directly with us, because then it's just more natural. And on top of it, technically, the volume from the video is too low. Can Felix try to get online? Yeah, Felix raised his hand. Can you try and allow to talk? Yeah.
Yes, good afternoon from Nairobi, Kenya. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you very well. So please try and share your screen. We'll have your
If
presentation.
enabled, please enable me to share my screen.
Yeah, go ahead. Try and share your screen.
I think my screen sharing has been disabled or something.
You have the moderator, right? Yeah, multiple partner participants.
Alternatively, if they run my screens, I'll still
Okay, then we do have to switch back to the video. I hope the volume has been fixed. Is it a bit?
My name is Felix Materi, and on behalf of the listed contributors, I'll be presenting part of my PhD work, and I'll be presenting on the influence of composting materials available in the tropics and composting duration on the influence and quality of manure during composting. Composting is necessary, and by composting, I mean thermophilic composting is necessary because if manure is used fresh or raw, it poses a risk, potential risk of transmitting plant parasitic microbes, such as those responsible for wilting, and it also poses a risk of scorching plants by supplying unstable forms of nutrients such as ammonia. Moreover, it poses a risk of transmitting weeds such as trigger, which
Yeah, I
in
think
turn affects
that kind of volume we can
plant
live.
health and plant growth and
Maybe we should
productivity in
close the
farms.
windows then.
Worse still,
Can somebody?
poses a risk of transmitting potential
Yeah,
human
we will
pathogens
restart.
such as
Sorry for all the technical problems. As usual, having a hybrid conference is always not as nice as just being all around. But so Felix, we will screen your video now, and we'll catch the questions afterwards. Okay, let's go.
My name is Felix Mageri, and on behalf of the listed contributors, I'll be presenting part of my PhD work, and I'll be presenting on the influence of composting materials available in the tropics and composting duration on the influence and quality of manure during composting. Composting is necessary, and by composting, I mean thermophilic composting is necessary because if manure is used fresh or raw, it poses a risk, potential risk of transmitting plant parasitic microbes, such as those responsible for wilting, and it also poses a risk of scorching plants by supplying unstable forms of nutrients such as ammonia. Moreover, it poses a risk of transmitting weeds such as trigger, which in turn affects plant health and plant growth and productivity in the farms. Worse still, it poses a risk of transmitting potential human pathogens such as E. coli and Salmonella, and therefore this necessitates composting. And through composting, we supply free-living microbes or the good microbes to the soils. And we also supply stable forms of nutrients to the soils, as well as recycle nutrients around the farms, such as dry maize stalk, which otherwise can only be used for mulching and therefore necessary to compost. Composting also serves as a means of sanitizing the pathogens that I mentioned earlier and weeds, and therefore this makes it easier to manure. However, there have been a concern of reduction of nutrient levels, despite the stabilization, reduction of nutrient levels in the compost, and therefore this necessitates understanding as to when and what causes the losses of nutrients or reduction of nutrients in the final product. Well, this informs our rational composting treatments. And for this context, we studied the influence of commonly used green materials that supply or supplement nitrogen in manure during composting. Generally, good to mention early enough that typical composting as per best practice dictates manure as a primary medium of composting, and it is supplemented with dry materials such as dry maize stalk, to supply carbon, and green materials supply or supplement nitrogen during compost. And this formed the rational experimental design, or the basis for our rational experimental design. And for legibility of our outputs, I'll be regarding Tithonia-based compost as T, and lantana-based compost as L, and grass-based compost as G, and the mixture as LTG. Sampling was done beginning the 21st day of composting up to 24 days of composting, and that was every 3 weeks. Sample collection and preparation was done as per the requirement of each procedure, and physicochemical analysis was done using gravimetric methods. For DNA extraction, total DNA was extracted and amplified and sequenced under the Illumina MySeq platform before bioinformatics analysis with data tool for diversity prediction, and functional prediction was done using PyCRAS2 workflow. Statistical data analysis was done as per standard procedures. The evolution of nutrients and greenhouse gases, we picked just as a few. With regard to CO2 evolution, we noticed that we had a significant dissipation of CO2 in the early stages of composting. As you can see, it's approximately 11% across all treatments, irrespective of the treatments. And this reduced in all treatments towards the end of the composting process. Closely related to that, organic carbon, from our study, irrespective of the treatments, we had up to 50% loss of organic carbon from the compost environment. And as you notice, for example, in lantana-based compost, we had 28% at 21 days. We had 28% organic carbon at 21 days of composting. And this reduced to 13.67% at the end of the composting process, such a major loss of organic carbon from the compost environment. And the scenario was almost similar with regard to nitrogen, irrespective of the treatment. We lost close to 50% nitrogen from the beginning or from the baseline, that is 21 days of composting, compared to the end of the composting process. And therefore, with regard to greenhouse gas evolution and nutrients evolution, composting days had a major influence irrespective of the treatments. A critical element of composting or thermophilic compost and a critical definer, to clarify, we noticed that with daily temperature logs, we realized that the first 21 days of composting are very critical. I mentioned earlier that compost sanitizes pathogenic microbes and weeds, and this is done at temperatures, most of us put it at temperatures above 40 degrees. And therefore, these very first 21 days are very critical for sanitization of pathogens and weeds in the compost environment. With regard to microbial diversity or the evolution of microbes, the two panels, the panel on the left of the screen is for the influence of the composting materials, and the panel on the right is for the influence of the composting base. And from the study, these are box and whisker outputs of alpha diversity. We deduced that lantana-based compost had the highest mean abundance or the highest abundance, while grass-based compost had the highest species diversity, and evenness was highest in lantana-based compost. With regard to the composting days, 42 days of composting had the most diverse, had the most diversity. Had the most abundance, and diversity was almost similar amongst all treatments. And by this, by diversity, I'm meaning the Shannon and Simpson matrices of diversity. With regards to the connection or the relations between the physical chemical parameters as well as the microbial loads or the microbial diversities in the compost environment, that is the reciprocity between the two factors. It's good to mention that nitrates and ammonia and temperature had the main influence on diversity, contributing up to 46.6% of diversity, of microbial diversity in the compost environment. Notably, we had excellent findings of bacteria. For example, bacilli, class bacilli is a bacterial class, was associated with the decreasing ammonia, and this has been regarded or has been shown in literature as an important nitrogen stabilizer. And therefore, composting now becomes superior in that it coaches or it brings along the presence of such microbes. Also notably, we had class Spirochaetia, which is a carbon catabolizing enzyme or carbon catabolizing bacteria, and it was associated with the increasing temperatures, as you can see on the plot, and this was responsible for the spike in temperatures in the compost, and therefore a critical microbe with regard to sanitization of bad pathogens or pathogens in the compost environment. In conclusion, and in the interest of time, we noticed or we observed significant losses of nutrients. I mentioned that in my first resort, and there is therefore need to study the roots. Precisely how these nutrients were lost, and thereafter enact mitigation measures to ensure that we do not have such losses. And some postulated methods or rules of losses of these nutrients. I mentioned CO2, I already showed the data, but there is need to study other greenhouse gases such as methane, which is also a route of loss of carbon to the environment. With regard to nitrogen loss, I told you we had significant loss of nitrogen. First of all, we need to understand the materials. If our materials contain or the composting process contained labile forms of nitrogen. I already talked about ammonia. We measured that, but we need to measure how much nitrogen is lost through ammonia and nitrous oxide, nitrous oxide, amongst other forms of losses. And good to mention, in as much as we want to pursue that, compost still has to maintain the high temperature because it is necessary for breakdown of complex materials and sanitization of pathogens from the compost environment. This work received technical support from Syscom Kenya with the listed partners you can see there. And this Syscom Kenya is funded by the listed donors, among them SDC, LED, BioVision, and Hope Sustainability. And for my PhD scholarship, I want to sincerely thank the DAD and Kenyatta University in Kenya for awarding me this scholarship. I would be happy to take feedback and clarifications. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It was almost as you were there. Very good presentation. Yeah, any questions on your presentation? Yeah.
Here is Felipe from the University of Bonn. Wouldn't it be interesting also to evaluate the carbon lost after you apply to the soil? Because I understand that these composts are going to somehow stabilize and then they're going to lose a little bit of carbon again, or this carbon is going to be incorporated into the soil. But in order to evaluate, what do you think will change your analysis after you apply this? Will you have different results after you apply?
Thank you, Philip. From Ethiopia Agricultural Transformation Institute and Hawassa University. I would like to ask certain questions. The first one is in relation to the compost quality. You have used some crop residues as a substrates, which do have various quality issue. And I would like to know in relation to those substrates used, what would be the final quality of those composts? And that is the most interesting in terms of fertilizer, if you looking for fertilizer. Secondly, I would like to know what is the relationship between microbial diversity and abundance in relation to the quality of the in terms of compost.
Thank you. Felix, you're muted. Can you check again? You're able to answer these.
Yes, for sure. I was muted to listen.
That's why you got two questions. So
Yeah.
try to answer the first one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now to Felipe, I want to actually acknowledge your line of thought. It's actually part of the subsequent studies from this study that, but early enough, and I hope I'll be responding also to the second question. Early enough, it's good to mention that the dry material you saw there is should I call them the crude forms of carbon, for example, and this is stabilized to the humic material in the compost. Well enough, in the subsequent studies, we intend to focus the relationship now of this compost with the carbon pools in the soils. That is in relation to now the soil as an independent ecosystem outside now the compost environment. To the relationship of diversity and abundance of microbes in terms of quality of compost. Indeed, in my second slide, I said we call compost a technical job of life. These microbes that you need to cycle nutrients in the soils. Say, for example, the mulching material, the dry matter that you apply to the soils now, they need to be broken down by microbes for them to be useful in the soils. And this now is brought in by the compost, which supplies these microbes that are helpful now in the quality of the soil ecosystem. I hope I responded to the question sufficiently.
Yeah, you're happy with the answer? Okay. Any more questions? Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you very much. The materials you used for compost preparation, you were used Lantana camara. It is a invasive weed, and it is disseminated via seed. During compost, seed is not composted, or its decomposition is very low rate. So after completion of this compost, when you apply to the soil, indirectly you apply the seed of this Lantana camara, which is an invasive. So how to control this invasive weed during application of this compost? The other one is one compost to be matured, it takes 90 days, but you harvest it at 84 days, I think. Sometimes it takes more than 90 days. So is that this compost is matured for applications? Thank you.
Felix, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought there was an extra question. Now, I'm happy with the questions and feedbacks, the two questions. First of all, I totally agree that Lantana is an invasive, is an invasive weed, but commonly in the tropics is now used. It has gotten utility as a composting material because it contains nitrogen of up to 3%. It is good, and I acknowledge that the seeds are stubborn, I should call them, and they decompose slowly. But that brings us to what I presented, the temperature plot that I presented, that the temperatures above 40 degrees are what are used for sanitization of weeds. Those temperatures enhance breakdown of complex materials such as lignin, lignocellulose, and cellulose, which now makes up this hard seed of Lantana. And therefore, composting is not just putting materials together, it is achieving these high temperatures, maintaining nutrients and monitoring succession, which is what now we train our farmers under the SysCom project. And these materials, and at the end actually of the 21st day and maximum 42 days of composting, there's no such seeds of Lantana that can germinate because they have already been sanitized with the high temperatures. On the second question, yes, compost takes 90 days, but I want to tell you that it is diverse depending on the materials first. The more compost hits in the initial days, the faster it will decompose. Of course, you need to watch out so that we do not have cooking, if I should call it. That is the development of whitish materials due to high temperatures and moisture deprivation, moisture and oxygen deprivation. And this is managed by turning the compost frequency in the early days. The more you turn your frequency, the more you turn your compost, the sooner it becomes ready for use. So, and this study now informed the metrics that we measure for compost maturity is stabilization or stability of nutrients and microbial stability, which is clearly demonstrated by this study. We, however, see the need also to extend beyond 84 days. Thank you.
Okay. Correct answer. Informative. Okay, now we go to the online questions. Tithonia is a high quality material for biomass transfer to the relatively high level of N and P and decomposes faster to release its nutrients to the soil within 1 week. Do you think composting it offers more benefits than using it as a green manure, and why? Yeah, please unmute.
Can I respond?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I agree. And even in our trials at SysCom Kenya, we use Tithonia as a mulch. But the basis of this study was on the low nutrient levels that cattle manure bears during composting. However, some interventions, I mentioned that irrespective, whether it's Tithonia or grass or Lantana, the nitrogen losses were dependent on the composting days rather than the composting materials. And therefore, in some of the current studies that we are doing are rationing now the application of these nitrogen sources. We apply some at the composting time and later along the composting period to ensure that we don't have losses like we are experiencing in the compost treatments. Thank you.
Thank you. There's one more question on the chat. how did you extract and measure the microbial populations from the soil?
Thank you. That was we used precisely the most scientific total microbial DNA kit to extract the total communities, microbial communities in the compost. It's technically a kit that is used for fecal samples and soil samples and manure samples. And after extracting this was amplified. This DNA was amplified using for prokaryotic, that is bacteria and archaea, we use the 16S primers for amplification, and for fungi, we use the ITS primers for amplification before sequencing under the Illumina MySeq platform. Yeah, that's the route.
Okay, thank you. Another question? We have plenty of time since we are really missing one presentation. Yes.
Hello, I'm Lilian Kanjadza, and I produce compost commercially. I would like to know from the point of farmers, sometimes people have recommended, or from actually a practical use of compost, they have recommended to one another to actually mix manure with compost because they really are looking for nitrogen, high levels of nitrogen. What would you say to that? But also like to know whether scientific, analyzing the compost in the laboratory, whether it matters, because we know from use that when you actually apply the compost, there's a lot of benefits from the compost. So do you think actually analyzing the compost matters from the point of view of the farmer? Thank you.
Felix?
Thank you. I hope I had the questions clearly. The volume was a bit low, but first of all, if I got it correct, the questioner asked if it is advisable for farmers to mix manures and compost. By manure, I guess the questioner meant raw manure. Yes, it is healthy, but sometimes necessary to compost manure. If you could run my slides to the second slide, where I was talking of the risk of using raw manure. And good to mention, it depends again on the quality of manure and on the source of manure. For example, if you compost, say, chicken manure or poultry manure for longer periods, you're bound to have losses of nutrients, especially nitrogen, if you compost it for longer periods. And that now answers the earlier questions on the materials that was asked. As to if it is necessary to analyze the compost in the laboratories, I would say a big yes, because for one reason, initially people thought that just preparing compost, you supply sufficient nutrients, but you need to know how much nutrients you are supplying. For example, from our study, we realized that we have low nitrogen levels in the compost, which is now a focus for us as a project to improve on the nitrogen levels. So I say it's necessary to compost, to analyze the nutrients.
Okay, thank you very much. I think now we can move to the general discussion. I think we had a very, very diverse set of presentations, from welfare, economics, to forest management, compost management, conservation tillage. So is anybody ready to say, like, how can we bring this all together? How important is soil management? So you can just drop your thoughts here on the floor. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Well, I guess soil nutrition management is, of course, one of the important things that farmers do and that scientists have to focus on. I think that the potential of soils as a mitigation, like for the mitigation of climate change, is still undervalued, especially by policymakers. I don't think by people in this room. And the use of plant residues, as was shown in many of the talks today, it could potentially be huge. I myself focus on mushroom cultivation and on vermicomposting, which are also ways of dealing with crop residues. And these have the advantage of not only producing compost and thus carbon that can be stored in soils, but also producing food. I was wondering, or like, I always think about like what are the trade-offs, which case is the best to use, like whether you're in a forestry system and you use the wood, either you should keep it as wood to keep the carbon, or you can produce food from it via mushrooms. It's always a case by case thing to think about. Yes, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. For your hand.
Thank you. My name is Chike from Nigeria, and I am a PhD student at University of Hohenheim. Well, you talked about the fact that we've talked about soils from different perspectives, whereby I think the center of the whole thing is more like integrated soil management per se, because there is no one shoe or one size fits it all. Basically, whether you're talking about use of manure, agroforestry systems, the deep rooting plants to maybe recycle nutrients, all of them is all about how to manage soils. Usually there's another problem in terms of assessment when you talk about economics. There's this issue about if you want to quantify to know, is it economical? Does the farmer get some results out of it? How much does he spend? And what does he get out of it? Because basically to convince a farmer to kind of implement these management practices, his interest is, how do I increase production? The scientist is interested in, how do I improve sustainability of the soil? These are two perspectives. Sometimes they don't really meet, but we have to find a way to make them meet. Now, when you talk about the economics, maybe the man spends so much on the soil and then gets some returns out of it. But when it comes to economy, it looks like sometimes we don't really know how to quantify the ecosystem values of the soil. Because when you quantify the ecosystem values and add it to the economics of what it gets from selling its produce, it becomes something much larger than what we see. So I think that the economics is still quite important in the process, because eventually, if we can get the ecosystem services quantified, add it to the profits from the farm, then eventually it's easier to convince somebody that what you're doing is both affecting your outputs and improving the environment, and everybody benefits. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that statement. Maybe you want to.
Yes, thank you. My name is Clara Czakopek. I'm from University of Bonn. I'm also doing my doctoral research, but I focus on the socio-economic aspects, and I always look into what farmers think about those activities. For example, what kind of challenges do farmers have in adopting fertility management in Ethiopia, or the zero tillage challenges the farmers have in India, or there is an interesting topic provided by Felipe. There is a difference between reforestation and agroforestry, and I'm really curious, what are farmers doing on agroforestry practices that makes this difference, makes this dynamics, or the compost actions happening presented in the previous. So this is always I'm curious of, and it would provide more deep insight into the causality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, we get touching more and more the economics. So now you come in. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. My brother from Nigeria stated that all the studies are focused on integrated soil water conservation, but the main thing is it visible for smallholder farmer or not? Yeah, compost is increase the fertility and soil healthy. But is it visible for smallholder farmers? or not? That is the main question. So further study about the perception and also the impact on increasing productivity as well as food security is needed, in addition to measuring the laboratory or at the plot level. Thank you.
Okay. Is there another comment on this? Can we, yeah, right there, yeah, this one.
Thank you very much. My name is Milka Kiboy, and I come from the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture, and that is FIBL in Switzerland. And I think soil management is one of the main challenges that we are facing maybe in the tropics, and it's something that we should really look into. And as one of us said, that policymakers really have not taken this as a very serious issue to consider. Maybe I think that's one of the things that we should look into. And always we have said that it's good to use the organic inputs, and we keep on saying about animal manure, which is not really enough, especially from our smallholder farmers. So I am thinking that we should maybe appreciate composting, adding these residues to the manure as a way of improving the quality and also increasing the quantity of the organic inputs that we can use for that can be used by the smallholder farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Maybe a comment from my side. I remember reading a paper that says sometimes tropical soils are almost immune to fertilization. Maybe there's an expert here who can explain this to me. And that if the soil is so degraded that this little bit of nitrogen that you add or a little bit of NPK doesn't have an effect. Is there a way to work against that effect?
That's why, of course, it's true. The bottom line really is, that's why we usually sometimes talk about not taking everything we get from a particular region and transferring it to another region, because basically the regions are diverse. Let's say you're talking about the fact that they're immune to improving soil fertility. Let's look at it maybe from Europe, Africa perspective. Over here, the temperature is quite low. Degradation of organic matter is quite low. The organic matter you add to the soil here might last for 20 years. In Nigeria, within 2 months, it's gone. So if you practice extensive organic farming here and you practice it in Nigeria, then we'll stop. There's a need to kind of, for me, I think not more in terms of organic farming, but in terms of integrated soil management. Not just organic, but organic and fertilizer together. Now, when you use the two of them, integrated systems, the organic matter adds nutrients to the soil slower. So the plant needs nutrient to grow immediately. So the fertilizer you add to the soil gives it that nutrient. Whereas over time, when that soil, the fertilizer is gone, it gets from the organic manure. Another plus of using the two of them together is that when you apply your fertilizer, leaching and erosion happens. But the bottom line is that your organic matter has very high carbonation capacity, which means those nutrients are retained within that organic matter. So even while it's degrading, breaking down to release nutrients gradually, it is retaining what you have applied in terms of the fertilizer itself. So one, it affects the economics, because when you apply fertilizer and it's gone, you've wasted money. And then you've also polluted the soil. Both the soil and maybe if it's a runoff, it runs into the river, it pollutes the river, causes eutrophication. But when you apply the two of them together, organic matter gives you gradual release, but also retains the excess for the plants to use it over a long period of time, while preventing the runoff that goes into the river and the leaching that goes into the groundwater. So that's why I said there's no one shoe fit it all. Organics totally may work here, but it may not work in the tropics, because like you said, the soils are very, very poor. It's just like, let's talk about Nigeria. We have excessive rainfall in the southern Nigeria, southeastern Nigeria, because it's in rainforest. So when you apply the manure, within a short period of time, it's gone.
So even if you apply organic manure, within a short period of time, it is degraded and the nutrients are still gone. So the integration of the two of them is very vital. You cannot say, let's go organic and forget about the other. The two of them go together. That's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any statement on that? Yeah, now we get going.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Hirut Getachew from Hawassa University. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Hawassa University. Yeah, I agree what our brother is said. Yeah, integrated soil fertility management is very important. The problem in tropics, including Ethiopia, is our farmers, they are not accepting those technologies because this, for instance, if you take the compost one, for decomposition, it takes some time. The rate is very slow. So they are not tolerate to wait for decomposition and to use as a compost fertilizer. So they immediately use the inorganic ones like urea or DAP, something like that. So those inorganic ones are not environmentally friendly, but our farmers, most of the time, they are using those fertilizers. So now creating awareness to our farmers is very important. That's what I'm feeling from this presentation. So in order to use both the inorganic and organic fertilizer, we have to train or to aware our farmers. Otherwise, without creating awareness to them, just telling to them to use compost or something integrated soil fertility management, they don't accept. So the first thing is creating awareness, giving training is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe a final statement. We do run out of time. Wouldn't have expected that.
I'm Gerhard Pelzer. I'm a consultant in organic agriculture. So first of all, I feel that we don't understand really what happens in tropical soils when we put in that organic matter. So that will depend very much on the amount of water what we have in that region. Yeah, if we have a very dry tropical region, then a high amount of organic matter in soil, it's compost or whatever, will be beneficial. That is not a question at all. If there's a high rate of rainfall, probably monsoon area, that may lead to rotting, fouling processes. We cannot definitely say that is beneficial for the plant from the toxic substances that are developing under that rotting process, and probably the oxygen content in soil is blocked more by having that organic matter in soil and needed the poor oxygen in soil is used for that decomposition. So, and that is very problematic to say what is tropical agriculture, good or bad, but what I can say from all my contacts to farmers, it's not possible to let them do that composting process. A farmer is not a composter, a farmer is a farmer. And here, the farmers are not the composters. In Germany, also not. And we can buy the compost, or must not buy often. We get it delivered by the composting services of the cities. And we get it for free often, or pay small amounts of money to get it. So what the scientists want, that the farmers shall do more composting, is wrong. That is not the solution, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much. Time's up, and I would like to first apologize a little bit for the difficulties we had with the technology. I would like to invite you for this afternoon at 17:30. There's the poster session of this group here. 17:30 in the other building, and it's on the top floor. I checked already the posters. Level 6. So please consider some time to climb the stairs or take the elevator. It's on the top floor of the other building. So thank you very much. See you later at the posters. Bye-bye.